Our next guest is really, really cool guy. A lot to be proud of, for sure. I actually rented out my Airbnb in New York to come here. So Brian, your cut is backstage after the interview. Please welcome Brian Chesky, co-founder of Airbnb, and Ryan Lawler, our moderator.
How's it going?
Good. Thank you for having us here.
Yeah, thanks everybody for making it back from lunch. Brian had kind of a crazy morning. You were at the Apple event.
Yeah.
What did you see there?
Well, the first thing I saw was a pretty unbelievable production. The place was completely electric, and obviously everyone knows the news. The phone, which we were able to see in person, was pretty awesome. It was really insane. And YouTube played like completely live at the very end. It was pretty amazing. And the other funny thing was Tim Cook asked everyone, like, stand up if you're an Apple employee, and almost the entire place stood up. So it was like this huge house of just Apple employees. It was pretty cool.
So how does that work? Do you just get really cool perks like that because your company is worth like $10 billion?
I got invited, Joe and I got invited because we're friends with Johnny Ive.
Okay.
So I don't know why other people get invited, but we just happen to know him because he's a designer and we admire him.
Awesome. So yeah, you recently raised a big round of funding.
Yeah.
You're valued at about $10 billion, is that right?
Last round.
Okay. All right, so that puts you around companies like Intercontinental, Hyatt, Wyndham. Is that a fair comparison on a valuation like that?
I don't think like comparing valuations, first of all, is like a really important metric. I've always thought of us as much more of a marketplace than anything else. So I think like a more comparable company to think of us as like a marketplace like eBay. In fact, when we launched Airbnb, it was originally called Air Bed and Breakfast, and we entered Y Combinator. And like a lot of people now are called the Airbnb of or the Uber of, and we were not the Airbnb of anything because Airbnb didn't mean anything back then. And so Paul Graham said, you should say you're the eBay of space, because eBay was huge and everyone's got space. And so we always kind of thought of ourselves as the eBay of space in the very early days, and obviously we've become much more than that. But I don't think the valuations are like an important metric. And it's funny, like when you're a public company, no one leads the first sentence of an article with like Google, the $400 billion company, but there's an obsession obviously with private companies, and I just don't think it's the most important thing to focus on.
But it is interesting though that, I mean, what does it mean for you as a company to be a hospitality company with no actual real assets of your own?
Yeah. Well, the hotels don't actually own most of the assets. So almost like the big misnomer about hotels is that they own the hotels. Most of them actually are in a very similar business to us. So I met with a couple executives of hotels, and they actually say, you know, it's funny, your model isn't that much different than ours. Most of the hotel companies like Hilton and Marriott do not actually own their hotels. They have people that manage them, that people own them, and they're basically like a franchisee. And in a weird way, we're kind of like that too, except we're more decentralized.
Okay. All right, so you're not a hotel.
We're not a hotel.
But you're adding a lot of sort of perks for hosts. You're sort of standardizing what some of these listings will look like. Yeah. You're giving out fire alarms for some hosts. You just announced that you're giving out like Nest thermostats, neighborhood guides, stuff like that. So what's next? I mean, what are the other things that you're looking at to help hosts and make this a better experience for guests?
Yeah, so what we do today is we provide homes, and we actually started by providing rooms all over the world. And just to give you a sense of where we are today before I say where we're going, our record was about 2 weeks ago. We had about 420,000 people staying in an Airbnb, and we'll have close to a million homes around the world, and we had people staying that single night from 160 countries. So this has gone to a massive scale, kind of overnight. And it's been a pretty amazing story. And at our core, though, we're not just about homes for trips. We think that people, like if you go to Paris, you're not going to Paris to stay in a home. You're going to Paris because you want to experience Paris. When you go there, you need to happen to have a home to sleep in. And so we want to be much more of a part of the trip than we are right now.
So is that what that's what experiences are,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Like
people in life want to have experiences. And at the heart of it, we want to make sure that every trip that you have on Airbnb is a great trip. Now, the thing is, if you go to Paris, you go to New York, you go to Tokyo, a portion of your trip is in the house. And we're not present currently in the rest of your trip. And so I think one of the things we're really looking at is how can we become more present throughout the rest of your trip so we can make that trip an amazing experience. And it really maps back to what we're really, our core purpose is. And it's the idea that, like, if we're truly successful, you know, we're going to create a world where you can truly bring people together and create a sense of belonging.
Okay, but you have a product which is testing right now called Experiences, where you're allowing hosts to not just be a host of, you know, a home or a listing that someone stays, but a host that can be like a city guide or take you on a tour, stuff like that. Right. So that's what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, that is one of the things we're working on. That's that's a bit of an experiment we're doing. We have a lot of other experiments happening right now, kind of all over the world. And the idea is that hopefully over time we can start to package these things together to create a much more meaningful experience for when you're traveling.
Okay, so what about other value add, like pickups at the airport or dry cleaning or, you know, things that, you know, not to nail that hotel thing, things that like high-end hotels would offer?
Yeah, well, I think like the hotels are primarily focused on the like in-room experience, so they want to do things like room service. We'll be able to do a lot of different things the hotels can do as well. But one of the things we're really looking at is also doing things when you're out and about during your trip. So I think there will be a lot of things. I don't think necessarily we'll be the ones that do everything. I think, you know, we can partner with other companies. If a company's doing something really interesting, we'd be happy to partner with them so we make it more seamless for you to have that experience when you're traveling. But, you know, one of the things we did a few years ago is we had to ask ourselves, what business are we in? Are we in the business of homes? Are we in the business of space? We made a decision a couple years ago, and we said, we're not in the business of homes or space. We're in the business of trips. That's what we're in the business of. You travel to have a trip, not to have a space. And so space is a part of it, but we're in the business of trips. And we created this thing that we call Snow White. It was basically, we storyboarded out what the perfect trip would look like. And we said, we're only present right now in a few of these frames. But we want to get to the place where we're present throughout the entire journey. And so obviously, like dining in homes is one experiment we're doing. You know, we have tours. That's another experiment. But there's a lot of different things. We haven't officially unveiled anything. We want to make sure when we launch something, it's truly amazing. Okay.
Why did you roll over for the Attorney General in New York?
Roll over. Well, we got subpoenaed by them in late October, where they asked for data on 15,000 people. We challenged them in the New York State Supreme Court. We put up a fight for over 6 months. Very few companies have ever done that, actually. It doesn't happen very frequently. And we initially won the case. And then the judge narrowed the subpoena, and it was very clear that we weren't going to win the next case. And so we kind of all along realized that we and the Attorney General agreed on a few things. We agreed that the ordinary New Yorkers that's trying to make a living, there's totally acceptable behavior. We also agreed that there were a few bad actors that weren't living by our own standards of enriching cities. And so we obviously complied with that subpoena, and we had to. That was a court order.
Okay, but and you shut down those hosts.
They were actually shut down long ago. Most of the people whose data is out now, yeah, they were shut down like months ago.
Okay. But you were happy to, you know, take money from their bookings for years. What actually changed? Why are they bad actors now and not before this subpoena was issued?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that, like, to be honest, we didn't understand the scope of the activity happening in New York. So there were a very narrow group of people in New York that were turning homes into hotels. It was obviously not the vast majority of our activity. And when this activity was brought to us, you know, we obviously took action. And it kind of, you know, the marketplace grew so fast for us. But, you know, this was a very, very small minority of people.
Okay, but you still handed that user data over to the Attorney General.
Yeah, we had to.
Isn't that kind of like throwing your users under the bus?
I don't think so. I mean, honestly, we've protected the vast majority of people in New York. We put up a fight for almost 9 months in the New York State Supreme Court. And, you know, we fight to the very end until the end of a subpoena.
Okay. Does this set a precedent for other markets? Like, won't regulators or government agencies, you know, in other places say, well, you did this for New York, you shut down these listings, you gave over user data so that we could, go after them for running illegal hotels. Can't any city just say that now?
Well, we're actually already in discussions with dozens of cities, and we've been in discussion with Portland and cities all over the country, and actually all over Europe, to work on integrations around making sure that we have ways to comply with taxes like we did in Portland. And so when cities give us subpoenas, we'll of course comply with them as long as they're not overly broad. We always have to comply with subpoenas that are very narrow. Any company would, but the ultimate thing we want to do is we want to be able to enrich cities that we serve. And so we're in 34,000 cities. And so we're now in discussions with dozens of cities, not in every city, but dozens of cities with city regulators. I've met numerous kind of policymakers, supervisors in cities. And the idea is, how can we work together to enrich cities? And this program we put out is this thing we call Shared City. And we announced this in Portland, and it's an integration between us and Portland. And we did a number of things. The first thing we did is we provided, free smoke detectors with carbon monoxide filters in homes in Portland. We provided, we're promoting Portland as a destination. And so there's a bunch of things we're doing. And we're doing this city by city around the world.
Okay. Earlier today on Kim's panel, David Chu was here, and he talked about the legislation he's putting forward for San Francisco. Now, that would create a legal framework for Airbnb right now, but it would also mean taking down the same types of listings where, a small percentage of users have a large number of listings.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why don't you just do that everywhere? You obviously know who these hosts are that are running these hotel operations. And you know that it's going to be a problem in every market that you're in. Why wait for the order to come down from a regulator?
Yeah, well, it's not actually a problem in every market. There are a lot of cities throughout Europe and around the world where they're very happy to have types of business where people are managing multiple units. But we've actually been taking down lots of multiple dwellings all over cities around the world. And the notion that there's a lot of these people in San Francisco is just false. We don't have a lot of that activity here.
Okay. I mean, there was a study several months ago that said there are about 500 hosts that together had 1,500 listings, hosts with multiple listings. So these people exist.
Yeah, I don't know about that study. I think that was a San Francisco Chronicle study. I'm not sure about that data, but the vast majority of people in San Francisco are ordinary people renting out their primary dwellings. We don't have that many people renting multiple units. And the other thing is, a number of times people are renting homes on behalf of other people who actually live in that home. And so a number of cities, that's totally fine. So in other words, if I'm away, someone else can use my account to manage my listing for me while I'm gone. A lot of cities say that's completely acceptable behavior. And these people are getting thrown in with these property managers who aren't the same kind of business. So the idea is you got to be a little more nuanced city by city. But we're already partnering with cities. I mean, we're complying with San Francisco, we're complying with Portland, and we're working city by city all over the world. You kind of got to do it on a case-by-case basis. You don't want to have a blanket kind of policy because, unless it's something that applies to every city in the world.
So what kind of lesson has this been for you in politics?
Well, it's been an overall lesson for me in managing a marketplace. I've learned a couple things. The first thing I've learned is just generally, in politics, so much comes down to understanding. People have an opinion about you, and it's based on what they understand. And sometimes their opinions based on the people that have gotten to them. And so if you reach out to a politician to educate them, and you get to know them, you may be on a good basis. If you wait for them to kind of hear from other constituents, and you're really slow in education, then you start in a really bad place. So that's been a good lesson for me.
Like the hotel lobby that you're not competing with.
Sorry,
like the hotel lobby.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, we have good relationships now with the hotel industry, and there are some people that weren't super happy with us. But the other thing I learned was just generally this principles about managing a marketplace. So when we started Airbnb, I took the kind of Craig Newmark approach to managing a marketplace. Craig Newmark's the founder of Craigslist. And he thought, marketplaces or classified sites were kind of like immune systems. They had communities, and the community should police and moderate itself. And so we thought, our community fundamentally is an immune system. And if bad experiences are happening, that's not a terrible thing because ultimately the community will moderate and remove them. Over time, what I've learned is that, that's, a bit unrealistic. Like, we need to be much more proactive. So over time, we've gotten much proactive, whether it's on trust and safety, removing bad actors, providing insurance for people, being more proactive with regulators. So these are things that you start to learn, you get more proactive over time.
Okay.
And that was a pretty good lesson.
Okay, so I want to put something up on the screen. Up yet? Oh, there it is. This thing. What body part does that look like to you?
I think it's an ear. I guess it's whatever you're thinking about.
A lot of people have very dirty minds then.
Yeah, I know.
But seriously, so we don't need it anymore. We all know what this looks like. You partnered with Design Studio on this.
Yeah.
How many people were part of that process, and how long did it go?
As far as the design process?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we had quite a few people. We had dozens of people. I know where you're going with. Did anyone bring this up? And yeah, of course. And yeah, some people had brought it up, and ultimately, you know, we just fell in love with this symbol, and it wasn't the first thing we saw. I think, you know, people obviously have quite dirty minds. I mean, I think what we really wanted to do was, you know, we wanted our brand to become a universal symbol for something that's very important to us. And the thing that's important to us, much more than rooms or homes, is this idea of belonging. And so we wanted to come up with a universal symbol of belonging. And I love this symbol so much because I think it represents like kind of love upside down, like a heart embracing. And obviously people can see other things with it. But I think one thing we were trying to do was get people to forget the old logo. And I think if there was ever a way to get people to forget the old logo, it's something like this. And so it took the world by, like the media by storm, not in maybe completely the way we anticipated it, but we got people talking about it, and I'm really happy the work the team did.
So all press is good press on this?
I think on this case, all press is good press for sure. And yeah, I think it's been quite a, you know, the other thing is that like, one other thing I told the team is I said, don't worry about like agitating a little bit in social media or in the press. Like if you put out something and the whole world doesn't love it, that's okay. The worst thing in the world is putting something out and no one caring, no one ever paying attention to you. That would be just awful. It just means you're irrelevant. So we want to become part of this kind of social conversation, a bit of part of pop culture. And I think for that week that we launched this, we were.
Okay. So I was looking at your investor list, and you really have like everyone. You've got Sequoia, Founders Fund, Andreessen Horowitz, Crunch Fund. Who's been the most helpful?
We've had some, I mean, it's hard to pick one person. So many of them have been so helpful. I would say a few that come to mind. I mean, obviously, Alfred Lin is on our board, and Jeff Jordan on my board. The two board members were amazing. Ron Conway has been utterly unbelievable to us, and he's been really great. You know, Mark Andreessen has been super helpful. Reid Hoffman also, and then Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston from Y Combinator. So it's hard to really pick any one person.
So basically everyone has been the
I'd
best.
say just about everyone. The one thing I said is, like, when we brought investors in, I kind of view them as partners, like co-founders. You know, you can't fire an investor, so you got to make sure you can live with them. And so I thought, if we're going to have investors, they got to be people that we really, really love. And so every single round we did, the first thing is we never picked the highest price. So every single round, we could have gone a higher price, but we ended up picking the partner that was best for us. And we wanted somebody that we could have a really good relationship with. And until the last round, where we did get some mutual funds in, we had this really interesting trend where every single person who ever invested in us had started or run a company. And this is like true of about a dozen people, and this is pretty unusual. And the reason was we wanted people that actually add value. And so I've been pretty shameless about just pinging them. They'll all know that I kind of bother them a lot for help, so they've been really great.
Can you give me an example? Like, what's the type of thing that you bother someone for?
Mark Andreessen, one example. TechCrunch, obviously, mid-2011, we had the apartment trashing incident, and Mark Andreessen called me, and I wasn't exactly sure like how to deal with it. And obviously, we needed to have a response, but the response had to have some dramatic action behind it. I couldn't just apologize and say, I'm sorry this happened. There needed to be something substantial behind it. And the thing we came up with was this thing called the Airbnb guarantee, which we have today. And at the time, we were going to do a $5,000 guarantee. And this is the night before we're about to announce it. And Mark Andreessen comes to my office at midnight, and I'm showing him the blog post. And this is the apology post I put out, that I know TechCrunch put out. And he takes the post and he adds two things. The first thing he takes is he takes the $5,000 guarantee and he adds a zero at the end. He said, make that 50,000. Then he told me to add my personal email to it, which I did. And at the time, the $50,000 guarantee seemed totally crazy. I mean, we had because we basically gave people 30 days, and we wanted to restore confidence. If there's been any problem in 30 days, tell me what's happened. And we had pretty flexible policy back then. And for all I knew, we would have used the entire round to pay for the policy. And so having an investor give me confidence that we should do something that dramatic to restore confidence was really, really great. So that's just like one example.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up because, we all know about the trashed meth house and all that. But over the last 6 months, you've had stories about sex parties and squatters and listings with 22 beds stacked up against each other in one house. I mean, are we just sort of immune to this now? Is it just that you're so big that we don't care quite as much when these things happen?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing we need to do is put these incidents in perspective. When you have 400,000 people a night, it's the size of a small city. So if you were to imagine like presiding over a city, and you imagine a city of 400,000 people, imagine all the things happening in that city, there'd be a lot of crazy stuff happening. I think the vast majority of what's happening at Airbnb is good. And it's the reason why is because there's no anonymity in the platform. So there are incidents, but I think if you look at it as a percentage, they're going down dramatically, and they're not very common.
Is there more that you can do? Sort of
I think absolutely. There's always more we can do. And every time something like happens, it just really, like, it's pretty outrageous. Like, these stories were outrageous. I think there's continually more we're going to do. And on the trust and safety idea front, we want to go even further than where we've already gone. When we started Airbnb, there was no insurance. We didn't verify people's identities. You could be totally anonymous, and you could book an experience. Now, all that's turned on its head. And over time, what we want to do is provide even more authenticated identity. So over time, eventually, we want everyone to be vetted and verified on Airbnb. And we vet and verify everyone in a way, but we want to just go deeper and deeper on it.
All right. A few days ago, maybe a week ago, something like that, you announced a conference. You have this Airbnb open conference. And I can kind of understand, when like Box or Salesforce or some company that has like a developer ecosystem having a conference. But this is just for hosts.
Yeah.
Why is it important for you to do that as a business?
So about a third of our hosts depend on Airbnb as a job, and 2/3 depend on it to pay their rent or mortgage. So Airbnb is really, really important. And one of the things our hosts tell us is they say, Airbnb, we think of you as partners. And so we really are partners with them, right? Our customer is not the host. Our customer is the guest, and we're partnering with the host to provide an experience for the guest. So any company that has partners, they'll often bring them together, right? And so that's as a Box does. And so we think, just like eBay had eBay Live, we have this event that we're going to be doing, and it's just a way to bring our hosts together to make them feel like partners. And this is something they've been requesting for a number of years. We're starting really small the first year, though. I think we'll only have about 1,000 hosts, which is not a very big event, given that we're going to have, obviously, over 1 million homes around the world.
Are these hosts like people who are just like paying to be a part of it, or are you inviting them? Like, what's the process?
We are inviting them, and we're inviting them starting with our very top hosts. I don't think they're not paying. I mean, they'll have to pay their way, but they don't have to get a ticket to go in. And they're just generally people, I would assume, that are very, very passionate about the Airbnb community. They're like super hosts, people who care deeply about this idea of hosting. They love hospitality. And one of the things I would love for us to do is become the largest educator of hospitality on the planet. So, at the end of the day, what we provide is hospitality. We are really a hospitality company in that sense of the word. We're not a hotel company, but we are a hospitality company. We're welcoming people into our homes. That's what we're doing when we host on Airbnb. And so we want to be an educator of hospitality, and this event is going to be really focused on providing education about how you can be a better host. And our hosts really are excited about this.
All right, and part of that started with you hired this guy, Chip Conley.
Yeah, so Chip Conley is the founder of Joie de Vie Hotel Group. They started the Hotel Vital and the Hotel Phoenix around here, and he's been amazing. When we started Airbnb, I definitely did not think we were a hospitality company. I said, that's what hotels do. And as I learned about hospitality, I realized hospitality is really just providing service with heart. And what we do at Airbnb is that exact thing. But the difference between us and really every other hotel company is that we aren't really like a mass-produced thing. We are an economy that's powered by people. And every one of these people are providing hospitality, and they're not mass produced. And part of the concept when we did the brand launch was we wanted every single person to have their own mark, their own identity. And I think this leads to where I see a lot of commerce going in the future, whether it's us, Lyft, Uber, and a lot of these companies. I think in the future, the economy is going to increasingly become empowered by people. More and more people have power of the economy to be able to produce and create things. And the reason this will happen is because they'll have reputations. And this is one of the things that we've been doing.
Okay, so I see that,
Yep.
and it's an obvious trend, but is it a good trend? Is the 1099 economy good for the world, good for
You
the
have
US?
record underemployment since the Great Depression. Most of the people that have worked on Airbnb, that are hosting an Airbnb, didn't have an income before. I think anybody that unlocks a lot of inventory in the world, allows them to monetize the most expensive asset that they can't create, is great. And I think the 1099 world, that's like saying it's a hobby. Well, a lot of hobbies can stay as hobbies. In the future, people may have multiple income streams, but then more and more people can decide to become professional. We're seeing this probably more with ride sharing, with Lyft and Uber. And I think that's actually a great thing for the world.
Okay, well, we're out of time. That thing's flashing at me, so thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Ryan.